They called him the Butcher of Brooklyn. Tracy Moretti wasn't a man you looked in the eye, and he certainly wasn't a man you spoke back to. He ruled the city's underworld with a silence that was louder than a gunshot. But on a rainy Tuesday in a crowded Italian restaurant, the unthinkable happened. A waitress didn't just speak to him, she scolded his mother. And she did it in a dialect that hadn't been spoken in his family for 30 years. In that split second, amidst the clinking of silverware and the smell of garlic and fear, the most dangerous man in New York didn't reach for his gun. He realized he had just lost the only thing he couldn't replace. Stick around, because this isn't just a love story. It's a war story. The rain on Mulberry Street didn't wash away the grime. It just made the neon lights of Little Italy reflect deeper into the puddles. Inside Ristorante da Luciano, the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil, simmering tomatoes, and absolute paralyzing terror. The dinner rush was in full swing, but the usual cacophony of laughter and clinking wine glasses had died instantly the moment the black armored SUV pulled up to the curb. When Tracy Enzo Moretti walked through the door, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Enzo was 32, built like a linebacker, and dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than the restaurant made in a month. His eyes were the color of cold espresso, scanning the room for threats out of habit. Flanking him were two massive bodyguards, Dante and Rocco, but Enzo didn't need them. The terrifying aura he projected was weapon enough. But tonight, the most dangerous person at his table wasn't the Mafia Don. It was the 70-year-old woman clinging to his arm. Donna Isabella Moretti. She was tiny, draped in black lace, with eyes that could spot a dust mote from across a ballroom. She was notorious. Chefs across the city dreaded her arrival. If the pasta was 10 seconds overcooked, she didn't send it back. She insulted the chef's lineage. Table 4. The manager, frantic and sweating, whispered to the head waiter, "Put them at table 4. And for the love of God, keep the new girl away from them." The new girl was Sophia. She had been working at Da Luciano's for 3 weeks. She kept her head down, wore her brunette hair in a tight, messy bun, and spoke only when necessary. She was efficient, invisible, and clearly overqualified, though no one asked why a woman who moved with such grace was wiping tables in a mid-tier tourist trap. Sophia was in the kitchen when the silence fell. She walked out with a tray of antipasto and froze. She knew that face. Everyone knew Enzo Moretti's face. It was plastered on the front page of the Post every time an indictment failed to stick. She watched as the manager, Mr. Rossi, practically groveled, pulling out Isabella's chair. "The best wine, Signora Moretti," Rossi stammered. "A Barolo, 2016. Isabella waved a hand dismissively, her rings clicking against the table. "Just water, and bring me the osso buco, but tell the chef if the sauce is sweet. I will have my son buy this building just to fire him." Enzo sat silently, undoing his suit button, his gaze bored. He hated these dinners. He loved his mother, but her tyranny over the service industry was exhausting. He checked his watch. He had a meeting with the Albanian syndicates in 2 hours. He needed this to be quick. The disaster happened 20 minutes later. A nervous waiter, a boy named Paolo, who was barely 19, brought the osso buco. His hands were shaking so badly the ceramic plate rattled against the charger. He set it down, spilled a single drop of sauce on the white tablecloth, and looked as if he expected to be executed. Isabella stared at the drop of sauce. Then she looked at the meat. She took a fork, prodded the veal, and let out a sigh that sounded like a death knell. "It is tough," she announced, her voice carrying through the silent restaurant. "Leather. I asked for veal, they brought me the shoe of a peasant." "Ma, it's fine," Enzo grumbled, his voice a low rumble. "Eat." "I will not eat garbage." "Tracy." She slammed the fork down. She turned to Paolo. "You, boy, tell the chef he is a disgrace to Italy. Tell him my grandmother is turning in her grave." Paolo was hyperventilating. I'm so sorry, Signora, I'm so sorry, Signora, Enzo rubbed his temples. This was making a scene. He hated scenes he didn't orchestrate. Ma, stop terrorizing the kid. I am not terrorizing. I am educating. Isabella switched to Italian, but it was the standard, sharp Italian of the North. These Americans, they don't understand respect. That was when Sophia stepped in. She hadn't meant to. It was a reflex. She saw the boy about to faint. She saw the arrogance of the old woman, and something in her blood boiled over. She had spent 2 years hiding, scrubbing floors and denying who she was. But she couldn't watch a bully, even a geriatric one. Sophia walked over, picked up the plate of osso buco with one hand, and looked Isabella dead in the eye. The restaurant gasped. Mr. Rossi looked like he was having a stroke. Dante, the bodyguard, tensed, his hand twitching toward his jacket. Sophia didn't speak English. She didn't speak the standard Italian Isabella had just used. She spoke in the thick, ancient, musical dialect of the Aspromonte Mountains in Calabria. It was a dying language, specific to a tiny region of rocks, goats, and hard men. Signora, Sophia said, her voice dropping an octave, rough and authentic. With all respect, the meat is not tough. You are using the wrong knife, and if you shout at the boy again, the saints will weep for your lack of patience. Not the chef's sauce. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was absolute vacuum. Enzo's head snapped up. His coffee-colored eyes locked onto Sophia. He hadn't heard that dialect since he was 6 years old, sitting on his grandfather's knee in a village that didn't appear on most maps. It was the language of his blood, the language of his secrets. Isabella's mouth fell open. The imperious mask crumbled, replaced by shock. She looked at Sophia, really looked at her, taking in the high cheekbones, the fire in the green eyes, the way she held herself not like a servant, but like a queen in exile. You are Calabrian, Isabella whispered in the same dialect, her voice trembling. From the shadow of the mountain. Sophia replied in dialect, softer now, where the source is dark and the women do not raise their voices at children. Isabella stared for a long moment. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It was the first time Enzo had seen her smile in a restaurant in 5 years. Bring me a better knife then, child, Isabella said, her tone suddenly sweet. Sophia nodded, turned, and walked away. Enzo didn't blink. He watched her walk to the kitchen. He watched the sway of her hips, the straightness of her spine. His heart, usually a steady, cold machine, missed a beat. It wasn't just lust. He had women. He had models, actresses, daughters of other bosses. This was different. This was a ghost from the old country. Tracy, his mother said, cutting into her veal with the new knife Sophia provided. Did you hear that? I heard, Enzo said, his voice hoarse. She speaks the old tongue, Isabella said, chewing happily. She is fire. I like her. Enzo didn't eat. He signaled Dante. Lante leaned down. Boss, find out who she is, Enzo whispered, his eyes still glued to the kitchen door. I want to know everything. Where she lives, who she sleeps with, what she owes. Tonight. Consider it done. Enzo took a sip of water to clear the sudden dryness in his throat. He thought he had come here for dinner. He was wrong. He had come here to meet his fate. By 3 a.m., the rain had turned into a storm. Enzo sat in his study in the penthouse of the Moretti Tower in Manhattan. The room was glass and steel, overlooking a city he owned, but his mind was back in the warm, garlic-scented air of DeLuciano's. On his mahogany desk lay a single manila folder. It was thin. Too thin. Dante stood on the other side of the desk, looking uncomfortable. Dante was a man who could find a needle in a haystack, provided the needle had a social security number. Well? Enzo asked, spinning a glass of whiskey in his hand. It's strange, boss, Dante said. Strange how? Is she married? Is she a cop? Neither. She doesn't exist. Strange how? Is she married? Is she a cop? Neither. She doesn't exist. Enzo stopped spinning the glass. Explain. Her name is listed as Sophia Smith, Dante said. Social Security number belongs to a guy who died in Ohio in 1998. She pays taxes, but the trail loops. No credit history before 2 years ago. No rental history. She lives in a studio in the Bronx, pays cash. She works double shifts. She has no cell phone contract, just a burner. Enzo opened the folder. A blurry surveillance photo of her leaving the restaurant that night. She was wearing a cheap coat, head ducked against the rain. She's running, Enzo murmured. That's what I think, Dante agreed. Witness protection, maybe? Or running from a husband? Witness protection wouldn't put her in an Italian restaurant in Little Italy. That's suicide. If she's hiding from something personal. Enzo stood up and walked to the window. Or someone. He remembered the dialect. Calabrian. You didn't learn that on Duolingo. You were born into it. Keep digging, Enzo commanded. Contact our cousins in Reggio Calabria. Send them a picture. Ask if anyone is missing a daughter. Boss, that could take weeks. The family's over there. They don't like talking. Make them talk, Enzo said coldly. And Dante? Yeah, boss. Put a tail on her. 2 men. Distance only. Yeah, boss. Put a tail on her. 2 men. Distance only. If anyone else touches her, if anyone even looks at her wrong, I want to know. 3 days later, Sophia was closing up the restaurant. It was late, past midnight. Her feet ached. The adrenaline of the encounter with the Morettis had faded, replaced by the gnawing anxiety that was her constant companion. She knew she had made a mistake. Speaking the dialect was stupid. It was a fingerprint. But she couldn't help it. She missed home. She missed the sun on the lemon trees, the smell of the sea. New York was gray and hard. She locked the back door and pulled her coat tight. The alley was dark. She didn't see the 2 men until they stepped out from behind a dumpster. They weren't Enzo's men. They were rough, jagged, wearing leather jackets that had seen better days, street thugs looking for a quick score. Hey, beautiful, one of them sneered, stepping into her path. What's in the bag? Leftover pasta or cash tips? Sophia gripped her purse strap. Or hash tips. Sophia gripped her purse strap. I have nothing. Let me pass. She has an accent. The second one laughed. I like accents. He reached out, grabbing her arm. Sophia didn't scream. She reacted with the training she had received from her father's bodyguards when she was a teenager. She stomped on the man's instep and twisted her arm, breaking his grip. Bitch, he yelled, raising a hand to strike her. The blow never landed. The silhouette detached itself from the shadows of the end of the alley. A figure in a suit. I wouldn't do that, a voice said. It was calm, baritone, and terrifying. The thugs turned. Enzo Moretti stepped into the light of the lone street lamp. He was alone, or seemed to be. He held a lit cigarette in one hand. Who the hell are you? The first thug demanded, pulling a switchblade. Enzo took a drag of the cigarette. I'm the landlord. The thug lunged. Enzo moved with a speed that belied his size. He sidestepped, caught the man's wrist, and twisted. There was a sickening crack. The knife clattered to the wet pavement. Before the second thug could react, Enzo kicked his knee out, sending him crumbling to the ground. It took 5 seconds. Enzo adjusted his cuffs. He looked down at the groaning men. Leave. If I see you on this block again, you won't be walking off it. The thugs scrambled away, limping and terrified. Enzo turned to Sophia. She was pressed against the brick wall, breathing hard. She looked at him with wide eyes, not of gratitude, but of recognition. She knew who he was, and that terrified her more than the muggers. Are you hurt? Enzo asked. He didn't move closer. He gave her space. No, Sophia said, her voice shaking. Thank you, Mr. Moretti. He smiled, a small, crooked thing. You know my name, but I don't know yours. Not your real one. Sophia froze. My name is Sophia. Sophia Smith. Enzo raised an eyebrow. A Calabrian girl named Smith. You think I'm stupid, Piccola? I think you're dangerous, she said, lifting her chin, and I think I should go home. I'll drive you. No. It wasn't a question, Sophia. There are wolves in this city. Some of them work for me, some don't. You can't fight them all. She hesitated. She was tired. She was scared. She was tired. She was scared, and looking at him, seeing the strange softness in his hard face, she felt a pull she couldn't explain. Fine, she whispered, but just to the subway. Enzo opened the door of the Mercedes that had rolled up silently to the curb. Get in, and we're skipping the subway. You're hungry. I know a place that's still open. I'm not hungry. My mother hasn't stopped talking about you for 3 days, Enzo said, holding the door. If I don't bring you to see her eventually, she'll disown me. But for tonight, let's just start with a grilled cheese. Sophia looked at the open car door, then back at the dark alley. She got in. As the car pulled away, sliding into the New York night, Sophia realized she had just stepped out of the shadows and into the fire. She just hoped she wouldn't burn. The car didn't go to a diner. It pulled up to a nondescript steel door in the meatpacking district. There was no sign, just a camera with a red blinking eye. This isn't a diner, Sophia said, her hand tightening on the door handle. No, Enzo admitted, killing the engine. This is the vault. It's mine. The diners are too loud, and I don't like people watching me eat. He got out and walked around to open her door. Sophia hesitated. Every instinct she had honed over the last 2 years screamed run, but where would she run to? The Bronx? The thugs were probably still limping around her neighborhood. She stepped out. Inside, the club was empty, closed for the night. It smelled of expensive leather and lingering cigar smoke. Enzo led her past the bar, through the kitchen, and into a small, private prep area. He took off his jacket, tossing it onto a stool. Beneath the suit, his white dress shirt strained against his shoulders. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a faint, jagged scar running down his left wrist. Sit, he pointed to a wooden stool. He moved behind the counter. To her shock, Enzo Moretti, the butcher of Brooklyn, washed his hands and started slicing bread. He moved with the same precision she had seen him use in the alley, efficient, lethal, controlled. You cook? She asked, the surrealism of the moment finally breaking her silence. My mother taught me before she decided she was a queen, Enzo said without looking up. Gruyere or cheddar? Both, Sophia said. And pepper. Black pepper. Enzo paused, looking at her with a smirk. A woman of taste, he made the sandwiches on a griddle, the sizzle of butter filling the silence. When he placed the plate in front of her, along with a glass of heavy red wine, he sat opposite her. He didn't eat. He just watched. Sophia took a bite. It was perfect. Hot, crispy, comforting. She realized she hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. She ate half the sandwich before she felt his eyes boring into her. Who are you running from, Sophia? Enzo asked quietly. She put the sandwich down. We agreed. No questions. I lied, Enzo said. He leaned forward. You stopped that man's instep with a specific talk. You broke his hold using a Krav Maga technique, but you modified it. You didn't learn that in a self-defense class at the YMCA. You learned that from a professional. Sophia looked away. My father was. Paranoid. He made me learn. Your father, Enzo repeated. Is he the one you're hiding from? No. My father is dead. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Her father wasn't dead. He was something worse. He was the devil who had sold her. I'm sorry, Enzo said, and his voice sounded surprisingly sincere. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the marble counter. His skin was rough, warm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that frightened her more than his gun. I'm not in trouble with the law, Sophia said, pulling her hand back slowly. And I don't owe anyone money. I needed a new life. A quiet life. Enzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. There is no such thing as a quiet life, Piccola, not for people like us. People like us. People like us. People who see the wolf at the door and don't scream, Enzo said. I saw your eyes in the restaurant. You aren't afraid of me. You're afraid of being found. That means whoever is looking for you is worse than me. He stood up and walked around the counter, stopping inches from her. The air between them crackled. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her jawline. I can make you disappear, he whispered. Real disappearing, new passport, new history, a house in Wyoming where no one speaks Italian. I can do that for you. Sophia looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Why? Why would you do that? Because you spoke to my mother, he said, his eyes searching hers. And because when I look at you, I see the only other person in this city who is as lonely as I am. For a second, Sophia almost told him. She almost spilled the truth about Calabria, about the arranged marriage, about the blood feud. But she couldn't. If Enzo knew who she really was, the war it would start would burn New York to the ground. Take me home, Enzo, she whispered. Please. Enzo stared at her for a long beat. Then the mask of the Don slid back into place. He nodded once. Come on. But you're not going back to the Bronx tonight. Where am I going? The Plaza. I own a suite. You'll stay there. Alone, he added, seeing her expression. I have business to finish, but I'll have 2 men outside your door. Sleep well, Sophia Smith. Tomorrow we figure this out. He drove her to the hotel. He didn't kiss her goodnight. He simply waited until she was inside the lobby, then drove away into the rain. But as Sophia lay in the king-size bed, staring at the ceiling, she knew she wasn't safe. She had just walked into the lion's den, and the worst part was she didn't want to leave. Sunday at the Moretti estate in Long Island was a military operation disguised as a family lunch. The house was a sprawling Mediterranean mansion surrounded by 12-foot hedges and armed security patrols. Inside the kitchen was a war zone. Isabella Moretti was shouting at 3 different maids in Italian while stirring a pot of sauce that was large enough to drown a man in. Enzo stood in the doorway, drinking an espresso, watching the chaos. He hadn't slept. Dante had come up empty on the Sophia Smith search, and it was driving Enzo insane. He hated puzzles he couldn't solve. Tracy! Isabella barked, pointing a wooden spoon at him. Where is she? Where is who, Ma? The girl, the Calabrian. You said you would bring her. Enzo sighed. I said I would ask her. She's not a pet, Ma. She's a waitress. She is not a pet, Ma. She's a waitress. She is not a waitress, Isabella scoffed. She has the hands of a pianist and the tongue of a viper. I invited her. Did you send the car? I sent Rocco to pick her up from the hotel, Enzo admitted. But if she doesn't want to come... She will come, Isabella said confidently. She is lonely. I saw it. 10 minutes later, the front gates opened. Rocco's black SUV rolled up the driveway. When Sophia stepped out, Enzo felt the breath leave his lungs. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform or the oversized clothes she used to hide her figure. Isabella had sent a care package to the hotel suite that morning, a dress. It was a modest, knee-length floral sundress, but on Sophia it looked like high fashion. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders in dark waves. She looked terrified as she looked up at the massive house. Enzo walked down the steps to meet her. You didn't have to come, he said quietly. My mother is aggressive. I could have made an excuse. Sophia looked at him. The morning sun caught the green in her eyes. She sent a dress, Enzo. In my culture, if a matriarch sends you clothes and invites you to Sunday gravy, refusing is a declaration of war. Enzo smirked. You know the rules well. I told you, she said, clutching her purse. I'm from the South. We live by rules. He placed a hand on the small of her back to guide her inside. The heat of her skin burned through the thin fabric of the dress. The lunch was an interrogation, but a subtle one. Isabella sat Sophia next to her. She asked about recipes, about villages in Calabria, about the saints. Sophia navigated the minefield perfectly. She lied about her village, naming a tiny town near the coast. She lied about her family, farmers who died in a landslide, but she told the truth about the food. When Sophia stood up and took the ladle from Isabella's hand to correct the seasoning of the sauce, adding a pinch of sugar and a handful of fresh basil, the entire room went silent. Isabella tasted it. She closed her eyes. Finally, the old woman whispered, "Someone who understands." The afternoon passed in a blur of wine and laughter. For the first time in years, Enzo saw his house not as a fortress, but as a home. He watched Sophia laughing at one of his Uncle Sal's jokes, her guard down, her face radiant. He realized then that he was in trouble. Deep trouble. He signaled Sophia to follow him. They walked out to the terrace, overlooking the manicured gardens and the sound of the ocean in the distance. "You survived," Enzo said, leaning against the stone balustrade. "Your mother is intense," Sophia smiled. "But she loves you. Very much." "She loves controlling me," Enzo corrected. He turned to face her. "Sophia, about the other night, what I said? About disappearing?" "No." Enzo stepped closer, invading her space. "About you stealing my heart." Sophia's breath hitched. "You didn't say that." "I thought it," he murmured, "and I think you know it." He reached out, cupping her face. She didn't pull away this time. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. Enzo lowered his head, his lips inches from hers. He could smell the basil and expensive soap on her skin. "Boss!" The shout shattered the moment like glass. Enzo pulled back, his eyes instantly turning cold. He spun around. Dante was sprinting across the lawn, his face pale, holding a red folder. A red folder meant a level 1 threat. Assassination attempts, federal indictments, or war. "What?" Enzo snapped, stepping in front of Sophia to shield her. Dante skidded to a halt, gasping for breath. He looked at Enzo, then at Sophia with wide, fearful eyes. "Boss, we got the hit back from Europe." The facial recognition software finally matched her. "And," Enzo demanded. Dante swallowed hard. "She's not Sophia Smith." Sophia went rigid behind Enzo. She took a step back. "She is Chiara Vitale," Dante said, his voice trembling. "Daughter of Don Salvatore Vitale, the capo of the Aspromonte clan." Enzo froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. The Vitales weren't just rivals. They were the reason Enzo's father was in a wheelchair. They were the family that had tried to blow up this very house 10 years ago. Dante wasn't finished. "And there's a contract out on her, boss. A €5 million contract. Put out by her fiancé." Enzo turned slowly to look at Sophia. Her face was white as a sheet. Tears were welling in her eyes, but she didn't look down. She looked him straight in the face, the daughter of a don facing her executioner. "Is it true?" Enzo asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes," she whispered. "Who is the fiancé?" Enzo asked. Sophia's voice broke. "Marco De Luca." Enzo's blood ran cold. Marco De Luca, known in the underworld as the Skinner. A man so sadistic even the Mafia families in New York refused to do business with him. "He's here, boss," Dante added, checking his phone as it buzzed. "Our sentries just spotted 3 SUVs with diplomatic plates crossing the bridge. They're heading here, right now." Enzo looked at the woman he had just been about to kiss, the daughter of his enemy, the woman who had lied to him every second of every day. "Enzo," Sophia pleaded, reaching for his arm. "I ran because he was going to kill me. My father sold me to him to settle a debt. I had no choice." Enzo looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at the gate. "Dante." Enzo barked. "Yes, boss. Should I secure her?" Dante reached for his handcuffs. "No," Enzo said. unbuttoning his jacket to reveal the Glock in his shoulder holster. "Get my mother to the panic room. Lock the gates. Call the boys." He turned to Sophia, grabbing her hand. Not gently, but possessively. Grabbing her hand. Not gently, but possessively. "You lied to me," he snarled, pulling her close. "You are a Vitale. By rights, I should hand you over to him and watch him drag you away. Enzo, please." But Enzo interrupted, his eyes burning with the dark, terrifying fire. "You insulted my mother's cooking, and you ate my grilled cheese. That makes you mine." He racked the slide of his gun. "Stay behind me, Kara. Today, we go to war." The SUVs didn't grand the gate. They stopped with military precision, 3 black Land Rovers blocking the exit to the Moretti estate. The engines idled, a low growl that vibrated in the heavy afternoon air. Enzo stood on the steps of the manor, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, the Glock 19 held loosely at his side. He looked calm, but inside, a storm was raging. He wasn't just protecting a woman, he was protecting a Vitale. A week ago, he would have shot a Vitale on sight. Behind him, Dante and Rocco had taken positions behind the stone pillars, assault rifles raised. The door of the lead rover opened. Marco De Luca stepped out. He was a handsome man in the way a shark is handsome, sleek, sharp, and soulless. He wore a white suit that was blindingly bright against the grey asphalt. He adjusted his sunglasses and smiled, spreading his hands as if he were arriving for a garden party. "Tracy!" Marco called out, his voice smooth and accented. "Beautiful house, a little gaudy for my taste, but you Americans love your columns, don't you?" "Get off my property, Marco," Enzo said, his voice carrying without shouting. "You didn't file a sit-down request. That makes this an invasion." "An invasion?" Marco laughed, walking casually toward the closed iron gate. No. This is a retrieval mission. You have something of mine. A little runaway bird. Brunette, green eyes, likes to lie." Enzo didn't blink. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play games, Butcher." Marco's smile vanished, replaced by a razor-thin grimace. "My tracker places her phone in your house. Now, I know the Vitals and the Morettis have history, but surely you aren't going to start a war over a woman who belongs to me." "She belongs to no one," Enzo said, "and if she is on my land, she is under my protection." "She is my fiancée," Marco shouted, his composure cracking. "Her father sold her to me for 3 shipping routes in Napoli. The contract is signed." "I don't care about your contracts," Enzo replied coldly. "Turn around, or I bury you here." Marco stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then he sighed and snapped his fingers. The rear doors of the SUVs opened. 6 men stepped out, racking slide actions on submachine guns. "I didn't want to be rude," Marco said, "but I need her back. She took something from me, Enzo. Something very expensive. Something very expensive." Before Enzo could ask what it was, the first shot rang out. It shattered the stone urn next to Enzo's head. "Fire!" Enzo roared. The estate erupted into chaos. Dante and Rocco opened up with controlled bursts, pinning Marco's men behind their armored vehicles. Bullets chipped away at the beautiful masonry of the Moretti mansion. Enzo ducked back inside the heavy oak doors, slamming them shut and bolting them just as wood splinters exploded inward from a spray of bullets. He turned. Sofia Chiara was standing in the grand foyer, her face pale, holding Isabella's arm. "They are shooting," Isabella shouted, not in fear, but in outrage. "At my house, during Sunday gravy." "Ma, get to the panic room," Enzo ordered, grabbing Chiara's hand. "Dante, cover the back." They'll try to flank through the kitchen. "Where are we going?" Chiara asked, stumbling as Enzo dragged her toward the garage. "We can't stay here," Enzo said grimly. "They have heavy weaponry. They have heavy weaponry. The police are paid off. They won't come for at least 20 minutes. We need to leave." They burst into the garage, where Enzo's collection of cars sat beaming. He ignored the Ferrari and the Lamborghinis. He ran straight to a vintage 1970 Chevy Chevelle SS, matte black. It was a tank of a car, reinforced with steel plating and bulletproof glass. "Get in." He shoved her into the passenger seat. As he fired the engine, the roar of the V8 shook the walls. The garage door opened, and Enzo reversed out, spinning the car 180 degrees. "Hold on." He gunned it. The Chevelle tore down the driveway, not toward the main gate where Marco was waiting, but straight across the lawn, smashing through Isabella's prize-winning rose bushes. "My mother is going to kill you for that," Kyra screamed over the engine noise. "If Marco kills us first, it won't matter." Enzo aimed the car at the side perimeter wall. It was brick, 6 feet high. "Enzo, the wall. Trust me." He didn't hit the brakes. He hit a hidden remote on his visor. A section of the brick wall, actually a reinforced steel panel, painted to look like brick, slid open just seconds before impact. They shot through the gap, tires squealing onto the service road, leaving the gunfire and the estate behind them. Enzo drove like a madman, weaving through the back roads of Long Island, checking the rearview mirror every 3 seconds. Only when they hit the highway, merging into anonymous traffic, did he slow down. The silence in the car was deafening. Enzo gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He didn't look at her. "Start talking," he said, his voice low and lethal. "And this time, Chiara, if you lie to me, I will open this door and push you out at 80 miles an hour." Chiara took a shaky breath. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a small black USB drive. "He doesn't just want me for the marriage," she whispered. "He wants this." Enzo glanced at it. "What is it?" "The ledger," she said. "Marco isn't just a skinner. He manages the accounts for the entire Calabrian syndicate's human trafficking ring. Names, routes, payoffs to politicians in Rome and Washington. If this gets out, he's finished. My father is finished. My father is finished. Everyone is finished." Enzo slammed on the brakes, pulling the car onto the hard shoulder of the highway. Gravel sprayed everywhere. He turned to her, his eyes blazing. "You stole the syndicate's black book? Are you insane? You didn't just start a war, Chiara. You signed a death warrant for every person you stand next to." "I couldn't let them do it anymore," she cried, tears finally spilling over. "Enzo, they were moving girls. Girls younger than me. I found the files on my father's computer. I copied them and I ran. I wasn't trying to save myself. I was trying to stop them." Enzo stared at her. He looked for the deception, the manipulation he was used to seeing in everyone else. He saw only desperation and a fierce, terrifying bravery. She wasn't a spoiled princess running from a loveless marriage. She was a whistleblower running from hell. Enzo let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "You stupid, brave, reckless woman. Are you going to give me back to him?" she asked, trembling. Enzo put the car in gear. He looked at the road ahead, his jaw set. "No," he said. "We're going to burn them down." The safe house wasn't a basement. It was a penthouse apartment in a half-finished luxury high-rise in Brooklyn. Enzo owned the construction company. The elevators didn't work yet. They had to walk up 20 flights of stairs. The apartment was raw concrete and exposed wires, but it had a working bathroom, a generator, and a view of the entire city. And, most importantly, it was off the grid. By the time they settled in, night had fallen. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the violence that had just occurred. Chiara sat on a dusty crate, shivering. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her cold and exhausted. Enzo walked over to her. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. He held a bottle of water and a first aid kit. "You're bleeding," he said, pointing to her arm. She looked down. A shard of glass from the restaurant shootout or the car ride had grazed her bicep. She hadn't even felt it. "Let me," Enzo said. He sat on a folding chair opposite her. He uncapped the antiseptic. "This will sting." He cleaned the wound with a tenderness that contradicted his size and reputation. His large hands were steady. Chiara watched his face, the sharp jawline, the dark stubble, the focused eyes. He was a killer, yes, but he was the only man who had ever looked at her and seen a person, not a commodity. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "My father ordered the hit on your father." Enzo paused, tape in hand. He didn't look up. "I know. I was there." Chiara froze. "You were?" "I was 22. We were?" "I was 22. We were leaving Mass. The car bomb went off early. It took his legs. It took my innocence." He finished bandaging her arm. "I swore I would kill every Vitali that walked the earth. Then why am I still breathing?" Enzo finally looked up. His eyes were dark pools of conflict. "Because you aren't your father. And because you speak the dialect, that's not enough reason to die for someone, Enzo." "It is for me," he said. "The dialect, it reminds me of a time before the bombs. Before I was the butcher. When you spoke to my mother, you didn't just speak Italian. You brought humanity back into a room that has been cold for a long time." He stood up, pacing to the window. "And I hate bullies. Marco is a bully." Chiara stood up and walked toward him. She stopped a foot away. The air between them was charged, heavy with the threat of death and the heat of survival. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the lie. My name is Chiara, but the girl who likes grilled cheese, she is real." Enzo turned. He looked at her mouth, then her eyes. The restraint he had been exercising all day snapped. He reached out, grabbing her waist, and pulled her flush against him. "Chiara!" he groaned, testing the name. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, fueled by adrenaline and rage and longing. Chiara made a noise in her throat and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. For a moment there was no war, no Marco, no Mafia. Just the two of them in a concrete box in the sky. Enzo broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing heavily. "We have to focus," he rasped. "Marco will tear the city apart. We need a plan. The drive," Chiara said. "If we send it to the FBI, the FBI is compromised. Marco has agents on his payroll." Enzo said, "No. We need to leak it to the press, the Times. They can't kill a story once it's printed. Can you do that?" "I know a guy," Enzo said. He pulled out his burner phone. "I need to make a call. Stay away from the windows." He walked to the far corner of the room. Chiara watched him, feeling a surge of hope. Maybe they could win. Maybe she could be free. Enzo dialed a number. "It's me. I need a favor. A big one." He spoke for a few minutes, his voice low. Then he hung up and walked back to her, looking grim but determined. "It's set. We meet the journalist at dawn. Battery Park. Public place. We hand off the drive. And then I get you on a plane too." His phone buzzed. Enzo frowned. It was a text message. Not on his burner, but on his personal, encrypted, secure line, the one only 3 people had the number for. His mother, Dante, and Uncle Sal. He opened the message. His face went grey. The blood drained from his features so fast, Chiara thought he was having a heart attack. "Enzo?" she asked, stepping forward. "What is it?" He slowly turned the phone screen toward her. It was a picture. A picture of Isabella Moretti, tied to a chair, her lips split, a gun pressed to her temple. The text underneath read, "Trade. The girl and the drive. For the mother. 2 a.m. The docks. Come alone. They have her." Enzo whispered, his voice sounding like broken glass. "They have my mother." "But the panic room," Chiara stammered. "It's impenetrable. How did they get her?" Enzo looked at the photo again. He zoomed in. In the background of the photo again. He zoomed in. In the background of the photo, standing in the shadows, was a man holding a set of keys. A man Enzo had trusted with his life since he was a boy. "Because the door was open from the inside," Enzo said, a tear finally tracking down his cheek. hot and angry. Uncle Sal, he gave her up. He looked at Chiara. The look of love and desire was gone, replaced by the hollow, dead eyes of the butcher. "I have to go," he said. "Enzo," Chiara grabbed his arm. "It's a trap. They'll kill you both." "She's my mother, Chiara," he roared, shaking her off. "I have no choice." "Yes, you do," Chiara said, her voice trembling but firm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the USB drive. "You can't go alone, and you can't go without a plan." She walked over to him and placed the drive in his hand. "They want me," she said. "So give them." Enzo stared at her. "What?" "Trade me," she said. "Take me to the docks. Hand me over. Get your mother back." "I will never do that," Enzo snarled. "You have to make it look real," Chiara said, her green eyes hard as diamonds. "But you won't be handing them Chiara Vitale, the helpless victim. You'll be handing them a Trojan horse." She walked over to the construction supplies in the corner and picked up a roll of duct tape and a box of blasting caps Enzo used for demolition jobs. "My father taught me how to cook, how to sew, and how to be a silent wife," she said, looking back at him, "but he forgot that I spent my childhood watching his men build car bombs." She tossed the blasting caps to Enzo. "Let's go get your mother back, boss." The Red Hook docks smelled of brine, rust, and betrayal. At 2 a.m., the suffocating fog rolled off the East River, isolating Pier 4 from the rest of the world. Enzo's matte black Chevelle idled at the entrance. Inside, the tension was a physical weight. Enzo gripped the steering wheel, glancing at Chiara. Her hands were zip-tied in her lap. But beneath the oversized suit jacket draped over her shoulders, her fingers rested on a modified garage door opener. "Are you ready?" Enzo asked, his voice rough. Chiara turned, her green eyes hard as diamonds. "I was afraid when I was running, Enzo. Tonight, I'm not running. Just give the signal." "Checkmate," he whispered. "Let's go." Enzo hauled her out of the car, marching her down the damp concrete pier. At the far end, under the sickly glow of a halogen floodlight, stood Marco De Luca. He wore a pristine white suit that defied the filth of the docks. Flanking him were armed guards, and seated in a wooden chair was Isabella Moretti. She was bruised, her lips split, but her head was high. Next to the chair stood Uncle Sal, staring at his shoes, unable to meet Enzo's gaze. "Tracy," Marco smiled, a shark sensing blood. "You brought the bird back to the cage." "Let her go, Marco," Enzo said flatly, stopping 10 yards away. He shoved Chiara forward so she stumbled to her knees. "Here is the girl. The drive is in her pocket. Give me my mother." Marco laughed. "Check her, Sal." Sal stepped forward, trembling. He patted Chiara's jacket, finding the USB drive but missing the detonator in her other pocket. "It's here," he croaked. "Good," Marco sneered. "Bring her to me." "The deal was an exchange," Enzo shouted. "I altered the deal," Marco replied, snapping his fingers. The guard behind Isabella racked his pistol slide. "I keep the girl, I keep the drive, and I kill your mother to teach you a lesson." Isabella spat blood onto the pier. "You possess no honor. My son will wear your guts as a tie." Enzo locked eyes with Chiara. He nodded once. Checkmate. Chiara dropped flat, curling into a ball. Her thumb slammed the button in her pocket. The explosion didn't come from her. It came from behind Marco. The spare gas canister Enzo had rolled under Marco's armored SUV during their arrival detonated. Boom! A fireball consumed the SUV, the shockwave knocking Marco and his men off their feet. Enzo moved instantly. He drew his Glock, putting 2 rounds into the nearest guard's chest before sprinting through the smoke. Chiara was already up. She didn't run away. She ran toward Isabella as a dazed guard raised his rifle. Chiara grabbed a rusted length of pipe from the ground and swung it with all her strength, cracking it against his helmet. He went down. She grabbed his knife and slashed Isabella's bonds. "Can you run, Ma?" Chiara screamed. Isabella stood up, shaky but fierce. But this? I can fly. Center stage, Enzo tackled Marco. They rolled in the oil and mud. Marco slashed with a switchblade, cutting a line across Enzo's cheek, but the Don didn't flinch. He caught Marco's wrist, snapping it, and hauled him up by his lapels. You touched my mother, Enzo snarled, driving a fist into Marco's ribs. And you ruined my Sunday gravy. He threw Marco to the ground and stood over him, gun drawn. Wait, Marco wheezed, blood bubbling from his lips. Money. I can give you roots. Money. I can give you roots. I don't want your money, Enzo said coldly. I want your silence. Bang! The shot echoed across the harbor. The Skinner was dead. Enzo turned. Uncle Sal was trying to limp away into the shadows. Sal, Enzo said. The name stopped the old man cold. Sal turned, weeping. They threatened the grandkids, Enzo. Little Tony. I had no choice. Enzo walked over, holstering his weapon. He looked at the man who had been a second father to him. You had a choice, Sal. You could have come to me. We would have died for them. But you opened the door. Forgive me, I forgive you, Enzo said, looking at the dark water. But the family doesn't. He signaled Dante, who had arrived with the cleanup crew. Enzo walked away as they surrounded the old man. He went straight to the two women waiting by the car. Isabella took Chiara's soot-stained hand and placed it in Enzo's. She hits hard. Isabella nodded approvingly. She will make strong babies. Now, take me home. 6 months later. The sign on the Little Italy storefront now read, Ristorante da Sofia. Inside, the kitchen was a war zone of steam and shouting, but it was a happy war. Sofia no longer Chiara moved down the line in her white chef's coat, commanding her troops. More basil on table 6, she shouted. The back door swung open. Enzo walked in, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, looking years younger. The war was over. The Vitals had crumbled. He wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her neck. You're distracting the staff, boss. I own the building, he murmured. I can distract who I want. Technically, your mother owns it, Sofia laughed. Speaking of Ma, she's in the dining room critiquing the mayo's tie. Enzo turned her around. The kitchen went silent as he dropped to one knee on the greasy tiles. He pulled out a velvet box, revealing a vintage emerald ring. Sofia, Enzo said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not good with words. But a man is only as strong as the woman who holds his knife. Will you hold mine? Sofia looked at the ring, then at the man who would burn down the world for her. Tears filled her eyes. Only if you promise never to complain about the garlic again, she whispered in the old dialect. Enzo laughed. Promesso. He slid the ring on her finger. The kitchen erupted in applause. The dining room doors flew open, and Isabella stood there. Where is the antipasto? She shouted, then saw them. She threw her hands up. Finally! Do I have to cook the wedding feast myself, or are you going to kiss her? Enzo stood up and pulled his fiancée close. We better feed her, he whispered. Yes. Sofia smiled, pulling him down for a kiss. But first, just one more second. And there, between the simmering sauce and the boiling water, the Mafia boss and the waitress sealed their deal. And that concludes the story of Enzo and Sofia. They proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you were Uncle Sal, would you have betrayed the boss to save your grandkids? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and remember, always respect the chef.